guys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Kook Shed, my own little YouTube channel where I share ideas and tips and even a couple of reviews, equipment reviews and board reviews related to surfing and bodyboarding generally. So today we're just going to do a little video on how to do small repairs on your surfboard. So you might have a small crack on the rail or a small dent or a fin chop or fin scrape on your board that you want to get fixed so you can get back in the water quickly. So this isn't for big repairs, this isn't for major repairs, okay? This is for just minor bumps and scrapes and things that might have compromised the water resistant qualities of the outer layer of your board. Okay, so that's a bit of a disclaimer because we're just going to do a small basic, or I'm going to talk you through a small basic repair. Okay, so I've got this board here, Firewire Tomo board, and it's got a crack there on the rail. So I got this board second hand, and it's generally in reasonable condition for its age. I got it quite cheap, but it's got a crack on the rail. I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up. You might be able to see it because it's actually quite dark in the crack there. So you might be able to see that there. If not, trust me, it's there. Okay. So first of all, you want a clean board to work on. Okay, so I put my boards out in the sun for a short amount of time, strong sunlight, usually for a couple of minutes, just for the wax to melt or get soft, and then I scrape the wax off and then clean it with a rag. It gets most of it off, and then I'll even get a little bit of turpentine, mineral turpentine, which you can get at most hardware stores and supermarkets and things like that, and I'll just wipe off any remaining wax with that with a rag. It seems to work pretty well, and so far I've found it doesn't harm the boards that I'm using. Most of my boards are epoxy or epoxy based. I've got a few TimberTech ones, timber outside, and it doesn't seem to affect them, and it cleans the deck quite well. If you're using a soft board, I don't know if that would harm the board. And soft boards, usually the repairs that I'm talking about, they don't really work with those sort of boards anyway. So this is mainly for epoxy and fiberglass PU boards. Okay, so I've cleaned the area around the ding or the crack first. Okay, so the next thing that I would want to do is to sand it back. So you can buy a little surfboard repair kits. They come with like little sanding pads. I've got a couple here that have been pretty well used. They've got two sides usually, a really rough side with a low granular count. So and then the other side's got a quite fine grade of sandpaper. But you can use, you can just get some sandpaper from the hardware store and grab two. Some people like to use quite a few levels, quite a few gradients, whatever the word is, of sandpaper on their dings. But generally, you use the low number, like 200 or 180 or something like that, something really rough first, you rough up the edge, and it gets all the sort of sharp edges off, things like that, and just preps the area because you're going to be applying a resin to it. So I use the rough sandpaper first and try and sort of clean it up, and then go to the fine sandpaper just to smooth it down once you've got it sort of to a level where you think you're ready to apply the resin. Now keep in mind, this is for small, quick repairs. If your repair is more serious, you may need to buy the proper surfboard repair with like fiberglass layers and things like that. This is just for applying a little bit of resin over a crack to keep your board watertight. You might be on a surf trip or something and it's your only board and you've quickly got to repair it, that sort of thing. That's what this video is for. So I've cleaned the area, if you're following along at home. So I've cleaned it with terps and then sort of wiped it down, got away any residue. Then I've sanded it with the rough sandpaper. Like I said, you don't need these little pads. They're handy, but you can get some from a hardware store, normal sandpaper, and maybe use a block or some sort of block behind it so it's got a sort of straight edge. You might just like to use paper without a block, whatever you find works, especially on these rails because they're curved. You might find that just paper that's not rigid might work well to just sort of wrap around that rail and clean it up. Okay, so once you've cleaned it up, then because you're going to have dust in there, you're going to have dust in the crack, clean all that dust out. Maybe some compressed air first, or a clean rag or cloth. You want as much foreign objects out of that crack or dent as possible. You want it clean. So get everything out of it that you can. So you've sanded back and you've got it sort of to see, the sanding helps the glue also bond to the board as well. If it's a glossy surface, it might not bond as well, and it might not make a smooth edge where the resin finishes and the board begins. So once that's done, you've got a nice clean ding that's ready to have stuff applied. You want to get the resin. Now, this is critical. You want to pick the right resin for your board. Okay, so there's a few different types of board construction methods, and it's crucial that you get the right resin that matches your board, because if you use the wrong resin, it can actually damage the board more. So I know that if you use an epoxy resin, a resin that's for just epoxy boards, if you use them on a normal PU or polyester fiberglass board, that resin, the epoxy resin, will damage the polyester, the PU board. It will go straight through it. Like if you put a drop on, it'll actually melt through the board. So make sure you get the right corresponding resin. So if you're not sure, ask your surf shop, tell them what type your board is, that sort of thing, and make sure that you get a match before you buy that resin, because yeah, like I said, it's crucial. So you can get some resins that work with both, and it will say that on the pack. So lately I've just been doing that. I did buy a few, epoxy ones just for epoxy, but now you can get ones that'll work on both. I've done a review on one, so maybe check that one out. That does both, and this one here also does both. This is Solar Res. It's been around for a while. It's quite popular, and it will work with both. As far as I'm aware, epoxy, PU, yeah. But just double check, okay? Double check. Read everything on the directions to make sure you've got the right match for your board. So yeah, you can get ones that work with both. And that'll cover. You might have a couple of boards that are different constructions. Okay. And the epoxy ones will work with the TimberTech as well. Like TimberTech, once it's damaged and cracked, it can be really hard to seal up again. But if I was to try and seal a TimberTech deck or a timber-based deck, there's a lot of boards that are coming out with the timber decks, I would start by looking at an epoxy based resin, because usually there's an epoxy core underneath. Yeah, that's just a rough guide. Okay, so now you've got your resin. Now this stuff sets with UV, so in the sun. So you can apply it. You can apply the resin. You can put it on a paddle pop stick. Some kits will come with a paddle pop stick or a few paddle pop sticks in them. You can apply the resin to the paddle pop stick, and then where is it? There. And you get some on there. You get some on there, and you sort of apply it to the ding, and make sure it's getting right in there, and you don't want any air bubbles in there, so use it to get right in there. See, I've even used my finger as well sometimes to really sort of get it in there. I can feel the crack, I can feel the ding, and I can sort of feel what the resin's doing there. And as long as I wash my hands afterwards straight away, it's been fine. It just comes off. So obviously make sure your hands are clean. You don't want dirty hands, because the dirt's going to go straight into that ding, and that's not good. So you can use paddle pop stick or your finger or whatever, because these are just small dings. Yeah, and just get it so it's filled the hole and there's no air bubbles. Try and get any air bubbles out that you can. You might need to even reapply a couple of times. You might need to put it in the sun and let it cure. These ones, the Solarez, I like the Solarez because it's really quick. Some of the others are a little bit slower to set in the sun, and I don't like having these boards out in the sun for too long, because they go yellow. It yellows the board. So I try and get a quick setting resin, especially if you're on a surf trip and you want it to set quick and get back out there. Go for a quick setting one. So I haven't had any problems with this Solarez here. That seems to be pretty fast, works pretty fast, and it sets rock solid. So you might need to, so you know, one thing I've got to say is, I know you're in a hurry, or you might be in a hurry, but take your time, because this repair might be there for years and years and years, and you want it to work. You don't want to be sanding it back off and fixing it again. It's better to get it right the first time. So if you are doing a ding, try and make sure you've got a little bit of time to just sort of take it easy, get everything right, because if you don't, it's going to be a headache for you. It's going to still leak, and then you've got even more resin and stuff in there that's, yeah, you can't get to the actual problem. So yeah, take your time, make sure everything's clean, all your equipment's clean, and that you've got everything out of that crack or ding that you possibly can. So you're working with a clean area. Okay, so you've put on some Solarez, or you put on your resin of choice, and it's set, and you might want to sand it, and then reapply, that sort of thing, until you've got it how you want. You want to basically recreate the surface of the board. You want it to match the surface of the board. So when you're finished, you might still be able to see the line, you might still be able to see the crack, but if you touch it, it'll be smooth. Okay? So you want it, if you were to not look at the ding and rub your hand over it once it's finished, you don't want to sort of feel any ridge or you know, aberration on the outside of your board, if possible. Okay, look, some backyard jobs, if you're new to it, where the ding's really an odd one or big or whatever, it might be really hard to do. Okay, but the aim is to get it back to the original surface of the board if possible. Okay, and that's why I said if it's a big ding, this isn't just going to work. You're going to have to get a big tub of the proper stuff, and there's a whole kit, and you've got to use layers of glass and all that sort of thing. But with this, little cracks and dings, you just want to try and get it to be as smooth as possible, to not disrupt water flow, and basically just seal it properly so it won't crack again, or so it won't leak water, that sort of thing. Which brings me to this plastic. So when you've got your ding setting, or you're about to put it in the sun, That's another thing. Do it in the shade. Do all this application of the solar res in the shade, or the resin in the shade, because once that UV hits that resin, it starts setting. So you might want to do it in the shade so you've got time to work with it before putting it out in the sun to cure. Sometimes I've found if the ding or the crack is in a certain spot, I actually put it out in the sun a little so it gets tacky, so I can sort of use it more. Otherwise, some resins are really runny and they'll actually start dripping or running, especially if you accidentally use a little bit too much. That's another thing. If you do apply a little bit too much, just use a little rag to sort of wipe up the excess around the outside as best you can, and then smooth it out again. Okay. But yeah, this plastic, right? This one's being used a bit, so it's going to get thrown away. But some kits come with some clear plastic sheets. Okay, so they've got to be pretty thick. You don't want them to just be, you know, like a clear plastic bag necessarily. But you want the UV light to be able to get through them. Okay, so just say if I had a ding there and it's all repaired and ready to go, and I've applied the resin, I put the plastic on it so that when it sets, the resin sets, it makes a nice smooth surface, because you know, you might not always get it right using your finger or using the paddle pop sticks or whatever you're using to smooth down the resin. So these are a great way to, you can apply them. Some people use the plastic to push out bubbles as well. Like they're just handy to have. So you use them, you put that over the ding and let the sun set that resin through the plastic. Now this one is on the rail, so I've got some plastic that's not as, like, this will always go back to its original shape, whereas I've got some other plastic, some thick plastic that I'll put over it that's a little bit more malleable, and it will just wrap around that rail a bit better for me. That's just how I like to do it, and it won't sort of pop back up like that does. So yeah, it's basically trial and error in an educated way. I'm sure there'll be people out there that go, no, that's not the way to do it, and I do it this way. But there's more than one way to skin a cat, and this is the ways that I've found over time that have just helped me get by and seal up a little crack or a little ding. Yeah, so they also, like, they stop, like, as I put these out in the sun to set, you might get bugs crawling on the board, or you know, ants or something like out in the yard, and this is a good way to stop any bugs or contaminants, things falling in the resin and sticking in there. So use a piece of plastic over the top once you've finally got your ding ready, because yeah, it'll stop anything interfering with that setting process. Okay. Now, once that's all done and your resin is set, gently peel off the piece of plastic. It should pop off quite easily if it's set hard. Okay, if it's pulling up resin, it's not ready. When you pull that plastic off, if it's sort of tacky, nah, it wasn't ready and you shouldn't have touched it. You really want to make sure it's set before you touch that plastic and pull it off. So once that's done, it'll sort of just pop off pretty easy, okay, and you'll have a hard board underneath. Then you want to check it again with your hand. You can feel the ridges where it meets the board, and then you want to sand it. You might want to sand the edges and you know, make sure it's a smooth finish. And look, this might take a couple of times. You might get it right the first time, but that's what I would do. You check that ding, make sure it's blending in, the resin's blending in with the board, it's not raised, creating a lump. And if it is, if there's issues, you're just going to have to sand it back a bit and keep at it and try again. Hopefully you've got it right and it's sealed your board, it's watertight, and off you go, and you can ride your board without worrying about water getting in or that sort of thing. Alright, so that's a basic, very basic, quick rundown on small repairs for your boards. Hopefully you've taken all the tips on board and it helps you to get back in the water and helps your board live another day. If it was helpful to you, this whole thing I did, yeah, hit like, let me know. If you've got other ideas, I'm sure there'll be people that have a way better way of doing it or have more input on how to do it better. Yeah, leave a comment. It might help me and others in the surfing community. So yeah, just leave a comment. You might have a trick that saves a lot of time, that sort of thing. Yeah, let us all know, because it helps everyone. Okay, and if you want to see more ideas and instructional tutorials and tips and surfboard and bodyboard equipment reviews, hit subscribe, and I'll see you here next time on Kook Shed. Thanks for dropping in. Catch ya.